have to edit as much. The last person's
Great.
Wi-Fi was actually going out. So I think there's 4 parts where I'm going to have to go and then link the video up to the audio. I'm like, oh, it's going to work on my editing skills.
Wait, that's a great consideration. Let me make sure I'm on my strongest way that I.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right. So yeah, is there anything that you want me to steer away from? I'm not going for any gotcha moments, but if there's something that you want me to not kind of touch on, I can do that for sure.
I know that you talk a lot. You said that you mentioned conversation, or like why people do the things that they do and things that happen in childhood.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I had like the greatest childhood, and I don't want to steer away from it, but I might be a little less detailed about it.
For sure. Yeah. So like right off the bat, like it's majority going to be, the first question is going to be, what was your childhood like from when you can remember to like middle school, and we'll just go over like activities, sports, and then we'll talk food wise and whatnot. But then if nothing goes in deeper there, like we'll just keep going. So
okay, great.
That definitely, if I sense, I won't be like, hey, what about this?
Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So here we go. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So we'll start off where everybody else does. As far as childhood goes, from when you can remember to middle school, what were you into as a kid? Sports, activities, stuff like that?
I actually wasn't a big into sports. Well, I did play soccer and tennis a little bit growing up, but we moved around a little bit in my childhood, and we ended up landing in Phoenix, Arizona, and I feel like that was really from when I had memories up and through my adolescence. So from childhood to middle school, I would say I really love being outside.
Okay.
I had a few close friends, and I was able to build more when I was obviously got a little older.
Yeah.
But as far as exactly like my activities and hobbies and things I was into, I was really I liked being outside, and I liked exploring with neighborhood kids too, but I was also kind of someone who was into like design and creative work, like whether it was, I think around middle school was the time that MySpace was becoming a thing. And I became interested in kind of like the rise of the internet and all of the freedom that comes with all of that too. So there's a little bit of both.
For sure. So when you're outside exploring, I would say as a kid, and now I'm finally getting better as it, like I just didn't enjoy walking or scenery or things of that nature. But what would you be doing outside? Was it nature itself, or just everything involved, or what'd you have going there?
So we had a little green belt by my neighborhood, and I would always like climb the trees.
What's a green belt?
I guess it's kind of like a park that doesn't have any park structures in it. So like no swings. It's just like all really nice grass, like hills that the neighborhood can come and like walk their dog at each night, or and there's lots of trees and lots of plants, but there isn't really much else. So people can run, people can work out in the park. But I spent like every night at the Greenbelt, either like climbing trees with my sister or kind of checking out, like I was interested in bugs when I was younger. And kind of like I would pick flowers, and I would do like flower presses and stuff like that.
Absolutely. That's very cool. And it makes more sense now since it was Arizona. Like they had to specifically put this area of greenness around, because everything else probably not so much.
No, yeah, it's not very rewarding to investigate a cactus because you can get thorns in your hand.
Yeah, not so much. So as far as growing up at that age, what was food to you? Was it just, hey, my parents put food on the table? Were you picky? What was your relationship with food at that point?
Yeah, it was very much like my parents put food on the table, and whatever they fed me, they fed me.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I necessarily like loved participating in, like
Mm-hmm.
cooking or any of that, or getting into recipes. It wasn't a, it seemed like more of a means to an end,
Right.
if that makes sense. Like it was just kind of, oh, something we have to do. We're hungry. We
Right.
need to eat this. And I remember we had a lot, I grew up consuming a lot of really low quality food. And so
Mm-hmm.
I try to do, I'm completely the opposite now.
Yeah. So as far as low quality, does that mean like processed? And then what was some of the go-tos that you
Yeah.
enjoyed?
Yeah, like we would go to McDonald's a lot. We would get frozen dinners a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we would cook at home, or when my mom would cook at home, it would be a really great meal.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it was like high fats, really greasy, really large portion sizes. And then there was definitely, and I'm hopefully a lot of people listening can relate. Like it was like you ate what was given to you, and you ate all of it. And so we always finished the plate. So even if I was given a super large portion and I'm not that hungry, I would eat all of it, even if
Right.
it wasn't necessarily. So I wouldn't say I was picky. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really allowed to be.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's tough because our parents grew up in the time where the food pyramid was carbohydrates, because the goal was just to eat enough because people were starving at their time. So their parents were like, you need to eat everything. Like we
Yeah.
got to make sure that we have enough food. So it's hard to kind of transition to abundance.
Yeah.
So did you feel um, that you would listen to your body, or was there someone saying, hey, this food's good for you, or it was like you said before, it just was?
It was very much the latter. I wasn't able to listen to my body. I am still working on tools for intuitive eating now, and
Yeah.
I'm 20, and I'm almost 27. And I definitely was told, like taught in the food pyramid, like how much dairy, how much meat, protein, these types of things were taught to me in school. And I thought that they were, I thought they were Bible.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely.
I wouldn't say I was making any of my own decisions or thinking critically about what I was taught. I was just accepting it as truth.
Mm-hmm. So as far as middle school to high school, do the activities change? We're staying on the green belt. What is life looking like there for us?
Yeah, so I became a lot more social in that time period, and I wasn't in organized sports, but I would travel for snowboarding like in the winter, but I wouldn't say that was like a consistent.
Where are we snowboarding in Arizona?
There's like small mountains, but also
Oh, okay.
Colorado's
Pretty
Colorado's
close.
right there too. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's California.
Okay, very nice. So how did you get into snowboarding? Was that family, friends? What kind of sparked that?
My dad, he loves skiing, so we'd been doing it since I was a kid. So I did it my whole life. I
Okay.
still do it. Yeah, but it wasn't like everyday sports, like after school. It was just in the winter.
Yeah.
And I played tennis, but
Okay.
my dad loves tennis so much, and it was very like he wanted me and my sister to be like tennis pros, and so we ended up like straying away from it a little bit and resisting. So in adulthood I love it now, but we weren't on a team.
Right.
And so I would say that my relationship with food at that point became pretty, like, I guess I would say like unhealthy. Like I was, I guess, a teenager, so I was about 15, 16, and I became a little bit more infatuated with like restriction and some disordered eating patterns, just from what you're kind of told by society at that age as like a developing teenager. But I remember I became a little bit more health conscious. And at the time, that to me, what I thought healthy was at this time when I was young was like lower fat. And there was this huge rise in fat-free stuff. And so I was prioritizing that, like fat-free yogurt, I remember, and all that stuff. And I started making my own food at that time. And cut out fast food, cut out soda. But still figuring it all out. I was still really young.
Right. So as far as when going after restriction, was this from magazines? Was this from social media? Was this from what other friends were doing? Where were we kind of picking up these influences?
Yeah, I am so fortunate that social media is not what it was when I was growing up in high school. But so I would say the influences were from like social groups at school,
Okay.
magazines, television. I loved reading magazines, and there was always like workouts, and I'm like 13 and that's not acceptable. And just like all these outside influences, but then also, I think that if you come from a family where there's commentary on your physical appearance, it can also take a toll on you, or you can just internalize some of it. And that was definitely the case with like extended family, like grandparents and things like that. And so I think it all manifested around when I was 16 or 17. And I just kind of thought I associated a certain appearance with being happy and having it all, things like that.
For sure. Yeah, I would say I had the opposite problem as far as family members saying things. I remember at one point, this was probably when I was in high school. Didn't look like I was athletic, but he's like, "Oh yeah, you look like Brad Pitt." And I was like, "Oh, that's wonderful. Like this is great." And now like years later, I'm like, everyone's just lying to me. Like,
you're like, this isn't true.
This is not true at all. My sister would be like, "Oh, you got great appearances," or like, "That's a great outfit." I was wearing like a button down, not a button down, but like a collared shirt that was really nice with like basketball shorts. She's like, "Oh, I like you switching it up." Just like, wait, someone might have helped me out like a little bit of honesty would have been good for me.
Hey, at least it helped build your confidence.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that is very true. So as far as the cooking for yourself, where did that come from? Was that from other magazines? Was that from family members? What was your go-tos at that point?
So my parents were separated, so I had different eating habits in each house. And so when I was with my mom, she always had a full pantry, and I would usually just I would try to use what she had. And that would be from recipes, I guess, online at the time, but we didn't have that many. So it would be from books that she had, cookbooks. And I would try, but I always seemed to mess it up. I got really into baking. And then when I was staying with my dad was very take out and eat out centric. And so we didn't often have that much food at his house. But when we did, I know I would always make these staple meals. It would be like toast with eggs, or like a smoothie, or peanut butter jelly, peanut butter banana, things like that. But I remember I developed like 5 to 10 recipes, and that's like all I ever ate.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna go blanket statement here. I'm gonna assume you're a pretty developed cook at the moment, or you cook pretty decently.
I guess relative term to where I was at maybe 5 years ago. Yes, I'm really proud of where I'm at now.
So and I think a lot of people see the recipes in books or online. They see other people cooking, and then they just imagine like, "Oh, I just need to be able to cook this well now." What was the process for you after struggling? When did it start getting easier, or what was kind of the process for your cooking skills?
God, I would say that it's still a process. Like, I'm still learning now. You have to be really intentional about wanting to learn new things, and you have to make it exciting and enjoyable. And I think that because I grew up with cooking not being such an enjoyable thing, it's definitely been a journey to get there. And now it's like something I do to calm down, or something I love doing. So I would say that I had to learn it all. It happened in college. Like, you just have to make your grocery list. You look up your recipes. I was always using Pinterest, and you get everything that's needed. And now because of that, I have like, I guess, that cooking feeling where you're like, I just feel like it's almost done, but it takes a long time to get there. But I want people to know that they can get there, because I started that process when I was like 19 or 20.
Yeah. So we're 19, 20, learning how to cook, snowboarding on occasion. What else were we getting into school wise or things like that?
Yeah. So I was in college at the time, so I didn't have a meal plan. So I don't know why I did that, but I was studying marine science. I'm a marine scientist, and that's what I was studying in college at the time, but I was in Arizona.
Okay.
And I was, for, I guess, the first 6 months of my freshman year of college, I was in a sorority, and there was a chef, which is just so obscene.
What?
And I know it's truly ridiculous. You pay
People are
dues
going
and
to the
there's
wrong schools. This sounds wonderful.
didn't last a minute there. But they had delicious meals. But once again, because were providing delicious meals a couple days a week, I was less inclined to cook on my own. And so it wasn't until I resigned and became completely independent that I started learning about really, really good recipes. But at this time, I was being super health conscious too. And
so what was it? Because they were cooking too much for you? Is that why you left?
that was not the reason why I left. The culture was not, I did not fit into that type of culture. I was on the road to becoming an environmentalist hippie, and I wasn't necessarily celebrated.
I can see that. I can see that happening. So backing up just a hair, where did the environmentalists come from? Obviously, we have the green belt, the insects. What else happened in life to where you're like, because I think people don't necessarily go into their guidance counselor and they say marine biologist. So what was the move for you?
So I originally wanted to be a photographer, I remember, but my dad, I'm so fortunate. My dad really always prioritized travel. Sometimes he would prioritize it over like basic things, but he always wanted to take me places. And so we would drive to California and go to the beach all the time. And I was able to learn how to snorkel and swim really young, which I'm so fortunate for. And Arizona is so close to Mexico. So it's definitely a place where you can travel to and from quite easily. And so I grew up going to Mexico with my dad, and I always loved the water. And I remember when I was planning on becoming a photographer, I was looking into schools. And I remember I watched this documentary, and it was called The Cove. Have you seen it?
Is that from Disney? Not Disney.
It's not.
Like a history thing, or?
It's an independent documentary. It's actually quite graphic, but I was assigned it for my AP English class.
Oh, is that the dolphins?
On it. That's the dolphins.
Yes. I've seen YouTube clips of it. Did not want to watch the full thing.
You don't need to if you see the YouTube clips. But I grew up in so
for those that don't know, it is a film about dolphins, correct?
Yes, it's a film about dolphins and how in certain parts of the world, specifically this documentary focuses on Taiji, Japan, how dolphins are corralled, and the nice ones are sold off to captivity industries internationally, and the others are harvested for meat in other areas of the world. And it's quite graphic, and it's almost like kind of like undercover vibes of the documentary. So there's a lot of scenes that are just very, they just really happen, and they're completely unedited. And I grew up, and for context, I grew up going to SeaWorld with my dad. It was a place of great joy when I was younger and didn't understand. So I see this documentary, I'm 16. I'm watching it with my best friend who was my partner for the project. And I just am sitting there like, okay, well, I'm going to obviously dedicate my entire life to dealing with it.
Figured it out.
And of course you're given all this pressure at that age to just figure out what your life's gonna be like. And
for sure.
So I was like, well, this is gonna be my life now. And so I think that was the moment I decided. And when I had that clarity, it was easier to take next steps and decide like what college, what major. And I just said marine biology. And I ended up staying in state because I was offered a scholarship. So I was in Arizona studying marine biology, which is more challenging than you think.
You said you would have to travel a fair amount for the water, so I can't imagine it'd be too easy.
I was definitely told that in order to pursue marine biology, you needed further schooling, and so it was okay to generalize your undergraduate degree in a general biology field, and then just try to get marine bio focus. So. I was fortunate that there were some passionate professors at my college that had field trips, and I was still able to get an enriching experience, and I'm grateful for that. But
so what type of what was the classes like? Because I know whenever I would go into a specific class, we're like, hey, that's a lot of information. Like that's pretty cool. So I guess being in that one, I feel like there'd be even more.
Yeah. Well, they make you take 2 years of really hard classes that are unrelated to marine biology to weed you out. And then so I'm taking like OChem, like with a tutor, like near tears. And I'm like, this is so unrelated to what I want to do. But the point is they make you do it. So it wasn't until my junior year of college, which I think that you're about 20 or 21, that I was able to start getting into my upper division classes, which were so rewarding. Very small classes. I went to a giant state school, so to go to a small class was great. And then we would do field trips to Mexico. They let us do that. There was a planetarium. There was
actually a passport every time?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was? Oh, I guess you went there with your dad a fair amount, so it probably wasn't too big of a shock to the system. But just going across the border real quick for school.
It was kind of casual. Yeah. I mean, and it was almost like, I was like, how is my professor getting away with bringing like 30 kids like across the border to go like tide pool and Rocky Point? And then, we did it so many times. And then,
so did you have to talk to Border Patrol every time? Like, did you have guards? Because Mexico, as you see on the news, not necessarily the safest place on occasion.
Yeah. And it's definitely you want to take basic precautions. So you talk to Border Patrol, you talk to Border Patrol, you drive during the day. You want to get to where you're going before sunset, obviously. And you stay in certain areas that are known to be quite safe. And the places we always went were definitely for students to experience like the ecosystem. I remember I got scuba certified there. It was only a 5-hour drive, so it was definitely the closest resource.
Yeah. What was it like scuba diving? I've done some snorkeling. I attempted to do some breath work beforehand, but when I was actually in the water, didn't really help that much. So what was the scuba like for you?
I remember I was studying abroad, and I knew that I had to get scuba dive certified before. And so I worked all summer to save up for it because it's quite expensive. And the checkout dive was in Mexico, and I got to go with the whole scuba shop. And so obviously cool. Yeah. And there's a California sea lions all around me. It was distracting, but wonderful.
So as in like the regular sea lion, just are those large? I'm thinking of walruses. All right, we're showing the thoughts there. So what was it like being around there?
That was really rewarding, but during your checkout dive, you have to be demonstrating all of these skills. So these sea lions like swimming all around you, you're like, I'm trying to focus. I'm like taking a test. I'm stressed out underwater, and these sea lions are like swimming around you.
Okay, that makes more sense.
How wonderful, right? And so I would say that it was around that time, around 2021, when I was taking my upper division classes, I was finally getting really enriching experiences. I was told, so I guess the sorority comes back. So I was told by my father that if I wasn't going to be in a sorority, I needed a different extracurricular activity because networking and opportunities. And so I joined this Marine Awareness and Conservation Club.
That sounds more your style.
Yeah. What was I thinking? I don't know how I thought. I was young, but I joined this club, and it was really enriching, and it definitely gave me all of the experience that helped me get into graduate school and helped me get my first job. And it was one of the best memories of my entire college experience.
That's super cool. So what were you doing with them? Like, what made it so memorable?
So this club, I was with them for 3 years, and I became part of e-board and then the vice president when I was a senior. But we did education and outreach in the communities. So teaching students and going to community events to teach people about the ocean. We worked in partnership with the on-campus planetarium to provide lessons to students, young students, older students. We did bake sales and raise money for organizations we believed in. We did guest speakers, and we ended up becoming a nonprofit when I was vice president, which was really big step. So what is nonprofit kind of get you? That just means you guys were not that big of a scale that you could go nonprofit, or what's that mean? So going from a club affiliated organization with the school to nonprofit meant that we could apply for grant funding. We could raise money for ourselves. We wouldn't sell anything because it's still a nonprofit, but we could, like, for example, we were developing all of this really great curriculum for classrooms, and we could say, hey, you know, this curriculum's donation based. Can you, if we're going to come to your school and do like a 6-hour presentation for all these classes, are you able to donate some money to it? Yeah. And help fund the growth of the organization under the umbrella of the University of Arizona.
Yeah. So, all right, 6 hours. Doom and gloom, or because as from a majority of the stuff that I see as far as like SeaWorld and all those types of things, and even some podcasts, like a majority of them are not like, hey, this brought sun into my life, obviously, because we had to show what's going on. But what was obviously not 6 hours, but what were those presentations like?
Yeah, and I think this is, I'm so happy you asked this, because this was also during the time in my life where I was taking these upper division courses, and I had my professor, I was having all this awakening to everything that's really going on to the ocean. And I was upset, I was frustrated, I was wanting to tell everyone and scream it from the mountaintops. And my professor takes me aside one day and goes, Carissa, did you know that positive messaging works better? And I was like, no, everyone needs to know. I was so upset. And now I like it. You have to make it, you can't, if you're going to focus on the negative, you have to focus on 3 positives after. And this is my involvement in this club, laid the platform for me to be involved in conservation, education, and outreach, which is what I've been doing the last like 8 years now. But because of my mentor at the time and this club, I was like, no, we're gonna make this fun. We're gonna make people excited. Why would I want to tell a 12-year-old child that we've just entered a new geological epoch where humans have made disaster? Exactly. Like, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, for sure. And at that point, for the people listening to the podcast, I think it's irrelevant. I'm going to give unsolicited relationship advice. So you're 100% correct. When you say something negative, it takes upwards of 3 positives to psychologically reverse the damage. If people are listening, they couldn't see me do air quotes. But it is something that's true. If something's a positive, it's going to trigger something in your brain, but something negative, it's going to trigger something a lot more powerful. So unsolicited relationship advice. Anyways, so we're going to these kids in a positive direction. That's awesome. So how was the response to that as far as outreach went?
Yeah, and this was in Tucson, Arizona, where I was doing this activity. So there was a lot of, I'm Ecuadorian, but there's a heavy Spanish speaking communities in Tucson as you get closer to the border. And so we were able to get so many kids excited about sharks, about dolphins, about fish, about coral reefs. We really just focused on if they were under grade 9, we didn't even really touch on conservation stuff. We just tried to get them excited about things that they've probably never even had access to before.
Okay.
So cool. I remember we did like we do dissections. We did a lot of like shark teeth anatomy, shark anatomy, so just stuff to make kids be like, wow, I didn't know that about the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
As far as you said, the ocean is an epoch. Is that what? Do I remember? What was that about?
Oh, so if you look at the world in geologic time, that's like really long time periods, like millions of years. There are different epochs, which are epochs. It depends. I'm always reading it, so let's see. But and large periods of time are characterized by certain traits. And so we've entered one called the Anthropocene, which is the era of geologic time that's dominated by humans. And so I was learning about this and at this time, and it was so crazy to me that like humans that have only been around for like 200,000 years have made such lasting impacts that it's actually a new geological era.
Hey, you know what? Making our mark. Wonderful,
making our mark.
So starting off learning all these things, what was your professors? Obviously, they cared about the subject. It didn't seem like they were just writing it in, like they were happy to be there. What were they saying as far as go-tos to kind of improve things, or they're just kind of putting the information out there?
I felt like it was more the latter. I felt like they were all they were living their own lives. They were trying to teach this content, and I was the radical student trying to overthrow institutions of oppression that I didn't believe in. And so I remember all my professors were very they were surprised, but I always had really good relations with them, because since our marine science program was small, there were only a couple of them, and they were such a great resource. But they were on this academia track, which is where you teach and you do some research and you're affiliated with the university, and you do that until you retire. And I was still figuring out how I was going to fit in the marine world. And I wasn't trying to do science, and I wasn't trying to redo research. I was trying to do conservation.
Okay. So as far as conservation goes, what did that definition look like to you while you were in school?
Well, I would say I was evolving like a lot as a conservationist. So I was becoming aware of just how all of my individual impacts are impacting the ocean. This was around the time when I discovered veganism. This was around the time when I discovered like plastic usage. That was a little later in my college career, but this was on top of learning about the ocean and things that were going on in the ocean that really needed attention. Like coral reefs are probably the biggest issue right now, the coral reefs and plastic. And on top of all these other things. So the types of conservation that we advocated for in the club that I was helping lead was like advocacy, like legislative change, awareness, but I was a little limited, but I was also going through this evolution, like as a person, like outside of being a student. I was like, my dietary choices impact the ocean, my basic life choices. And then like, you have to keep in mind, like everyone around me is like partying, and I'm like kind of moving into this like phase of, well, what can I do about it? I'm just one person.
Right. So as far as the conservation and plastics and stuff like that, can you give me it doesn't have to be a quick rundown, what's the rundown of not from farm to table, but from table to ocean? What's kind of the breakdown? Is it actually bottles? Is it bigger stuff? Is it smaller stuff? What does that look like?
Okay, so we started heavily using plastic in about the 1950s, 1960s. I think it ended up being subsidized as a material, and now, so great. And now it's in everything. And Hawaii has some really good waste management infrastructure, but the world doesn't, especially developing nations. And there are a lot of places out there that simply don't have landfills. And when something so resistant to breakdown is created on large scales, it is never going to go away. And we're like just now seeing it. So it doesn't matter. So yes, the safest place for plastic is in a landfill if it's not being recycled. Recycling is not really a solution to this problem. And unfortunately, because of streams to rivers to seas, oftentimes these things always end up in the ocean, which becomes a little soup. And because of currents in the ocean, they can congregate. So like, I don't know if you remember when we were younger, like learning about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch was the size of Texas. So now there's just now research is a very long moving train, and there's just now research describing exactly what this stuff is. And it's mostly plastic, it's a lot of it's fishing gear, but most of it's like fishing gear is also rooted in plastic, so it's mostly plastic.
Okay. So I guess another wonderful thing about this podcast, I get to run ideas by people. So as a child, I always thought about putting a dome over a volcano and then burning the things and then somehow having a greenhouse inside. Tell me why that wouldn't work.
Like, you mean burning all the plastic inside the volcano?
Yeah, and then somehow having the dome in the greenhouse, it would clean the air. Is that something that we could make happen?
Oh, we do not want to burn plastic. I think that that is very intuitive idea to have as a young boy. How
Thank
incredible. But when you burn plastic, all of these really harsh chemicals become airborne. And if that dome was fully sealed, maybe that might be a good idea. But at the end of the day, like if we burn these, we're contributing a lot of pollution, like air pollution, that can impact the health of us.
So as far as recycling goes, what are the options for the plastics?
So usually things that are recycled get recycled. If they are successfully recycled, they end up in the right bin, they go through the right process. They're usually recycled into something that can't be recycled again. So like a good example is like carpets. But once it's recycled down to that secondary product, it can't be recycled again. So that's why I always say that recycling isn't the answer, because things can usually only be recycled once or twice. And it's very intensive to recycle something. So it takes a lot of resources and a lot of time and a lot of money. And it makes more sense to just invest in something sustainable or in the original form.
Yeah, I saw something a couple of weeks ago that was saying that the oil companies were legislating for more recycling, because that means that people were happy about using the plastics. So like, oh, hey, like I can recycle this, like it's fine. But you're just going through bottle after bottle thinking like it's fine. Turns out not so much.
It's not fine. The oil companies are doing a lot. They're like, they're also like, reduce your carbon footprint. And you're like, what? You are the ones who are creating the entire footprint. So
as far as alternatives to the plastics, what kind of easy stuff were you seeing or are seeing nowadays?
So there are so many amazing alternatives. We've just been like, we have to keep in mind, like my parents grew up in a world where plastic wasn't used to this mass scale. So we might not be able to envision something else, but there are people alive today who can. So like glass, aluminum, for fabrics, linen, hemp is one of the most versatile materials, and it can be produced at large scale as of 2018. So like there are so many alternatives, as long as we just, it's hard to address plastic consumption at the corporate level. Like I think that requires legislation, but the alternatives are there. And I remember being a student and knowing and hearing a quote, I forget the exact nuance of it, but it was saying like, I learned that the technology's there, the solutions are there, everything's already there. People we don't need the innovation. Well, we still want innovation, but the point is the solutions are there. We just need to use them.
Okay. Interesting.
So
I definitely was more on the page of, I thought we just need to come up with something, but apparently it's there.
It's all there. It's not
so what brought you to veganism, or what was kind of the steps to that area of life for you?
I'm happy you asked. So I touched a little bit on how I was trying to be really health conscious, and I was I thought I was being healthy, but it wasn't in the healthiest way. And veganism helped add and food wasn't necessarily an enjoyable part of my life at this time. And veganism helped me had purpose to the way I was eating. It helped add value. But I remember I always knew I loved animals. I always knew it didn't really sit right with me to eat them, but I didn't really know the impact it had on the environment. And I didn't know the extent of that impact. And I remember I was a sophomore in college and I was alone watching YouTube videos, and I came across like a 15-minute video, and
Good old YouTube.
And
they knew you were primed and ready. We're gonna just sneak this video in here. Watch next.
Yeah,
what you're doing to our oceans.
Yeah, it was not even. It was obscene. I was like, what? And then that led me to watch a movie called Earthlings, which is very graphic. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this. And I tried it, and it worked for a bit. I would say
what do you mean by worked for a bit?
I would say that I was really gung-ho on it for a year and a half. And this was also like, by the way, I'm like discovering veganism. I'm like in an angry vegan phase. I'm like yelling at my friends. Like, it's not great. Okay. It's not sustainable.
Fulfilling all of the memes. fulfilling.
Yes, I really not doing great things for veganism at the time. But I became comfortable with not consuming fish. Fish was a large part of my diet at the time. And then I realized, then I kind of fell off I haven't consumed meat since that time, but I fell off the non-dairy train when I moved to Hawaii for graduate school. And at the time, I couldn't pinpoint why, but in hindsight, I know that veganism, while it helped give me purpose and it was so rewarding for me, it was also another form of restriction, which wasn't healthy for me. And so I helped find a balance. And then it wasn't until a few years ago that I started. Now I have a lot more understanding with myself about it, but I consume mostly plant-based, and I don't consume meat, but I'm a little more lenient with other things. And I try not to be so rigid about it.
Okay.
Because so I think that when I learned about veganism, it seemed overwhelming because I needed to relearn everything I was eating.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that I didn't have that much knowledge about it the first time.
Yeah. And I think everybody makes decisions off the things they know, and we're just learning more things. So our decisions usually change. So as far as the things you're seeing on YouTube and more research and for the animals and things of that nature, I would say I have these discussions with a lot of people. Is it the mass factory farming that you don't enjoy? What is the, or is it any kind of farming techniques in general?
Well, as far as the environmental impact, or as far as like kind of what?
I guess as far as veganism goes, or the information behind why you don't want to eat meat.
So I would say that people get to veganism in one of three ways, and I am a staunch advocate of all three ways. So health, animal welfare, and then the environment.
Okay.
The environment was the biggest kicker for me, and it's what made me be like, okay, I can make this personal sacrifice because I care about the environment. I recognize that not everyone's like that.
Yeah.
But I think that large scale factory farming is clearly the culprit. If we can get our dairy or maybe even our meat from small scale farmers, I would be jumping for joy at that.
Very
but
beneficial.
On a personal, it would be incredible. But on a personal level, I value the lives of animals. And so I would like us to live in a healthier world where there was more coexistence.
As far as don't want to be that guy on the other side. I like to more so just interested in questions that I would ask. So other animals, eating animals, that's kind of their environment. And now that we are no longer apes and so on and so forth, that's kind of a different realm, or what's your thoughts around kind of that discussion point?
Yeah. And as a biologist, I would say that I really value natural processes, but I would say that the way that we interact with our food systems now is not a natural process.
Got it.
Because I like to use this as a comparison. So right now we catch most of our fish, they're wild caught. Yeah. And when humans were evolving, we used to hunt a lot of our terrestrial meat, but now we farm it, and we're switching over to a farming model with seafood too, because there's such high demand. Right. And so while the large scale animal agriculture industry is necessary for such a large global population, I wouldn't say that it's sustainable health wise. Yeah.
Well, no, definitely as far as the fishing goes and stuff like that, all the tuna being caught and all it's just that there's not as many fish in the sea because of that, for sure.
However, I definitely don't think that veganism if every single person in the world went vegan, I know that that's not a viable solution in this day and age. And so we need to meet people halfway, and we can't we can't have this judgment about what the perfect way to do it is, because we're living in an imperfect system.
For sure. And I think that makes a very good point. Most people are you either eat meat or you don't, and that means you're either right or you're wrong. But I think the bigger picture is you're trying to help the planet at the moment. And I think you're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. And for people listening, like, you don't have to be a vegan to help the planet. If you can just reduce your beef consumption, you're doing drastic strides for the planet. because beef is really the largest component of the environmental factors.
So if they were getting it from farm fresh or like regenerative farming, so that's just more so just putting nutrients back in the soil, the CO2, they're supposed to be a net positive on that end. Would that be something that'd be like, hey, that's good for the environment because it's not the mass farming?
Yeah, I think that any regenerative system, more money going towards that, putting your dollar towards regenerative farming over large scale is enormous steps in the right direction. A lot of the issues are the methane that is excreted from cows, and so when we have so many cows in the planet to feed us, that methane contributes a lot to greenhouse gas emissions that can change our climate. So I think that you want to support small farmers, but it's hard to tell when you're in the supermarket, like, is this a small farmer? You want to get that stuff from like maybe a farmer's market. That's what you can be sure.
For sure. Awesome. So we are in college, finishing up our 2 years. What was some of the more memorable times advocating for conservation at school?
I got to go and do a lot of, I got to study abroad in the Galapagos, and I got to see an ecosystem that was not completely, that was untouched. It was what the world would be like if there were less humans, and it was probably the most life-changing part of my college experience. I got to talk to in a lot of classrooms where kids would come and talk to me after and tell me that they want to do what I do because of something I said. I got to work in a planetarium where parents would come and bring their families to learn from me specifically, like these types of things where I just realized that I was finding my way in the conservation space. And I found that way was through education and was through outreach and just talking to people, like having real conversations with people who think differently from you so that you can build bridges. You know?
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So where did life take you after college? What kind of opportunities were there for you?
Yeah. I guess for anyone listening, this is quite a competitive field. It's very challenging to get work, and I chose to pursue graduate schooling. And I remember I just wanted to go to California. It was my dream. And I almost got accepted to one California school, and she was pregnant and she decided she couldn't do both. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to go to graduate school. My life was falling apart. And then I got into school in Hawaii, never been here. I'm still here. Never been here, never visited, never vacationed. But I got into graduate school. And so it was only a 2-year program, which was great for my timeline because sometimes school can be up to 6 years. And and it was not research, which I was learning that I didn't want to participate in research exclusively. And I moved here in 2016.
Wow. So as far as competitiveness goes, is it because there's not that many places that have conservation jobs, so there's not as many opportunities, or what's the reason behind the competitiveness?
I guess that's a great question. It would say it's a small field. A lot of it's dependent on funding. So administrations in the country can really impact how much jobs availability there is. There's some level of ego associated with the level of schooling and qualifications you have. It's very who you know, which life is, but even more so. And in general, you really need, it's that catch-22, you need 10 years of experience to get the job, and you need the experience to get the job. It's a circle. So I didn't even apply for jobs at this point. I knew I was going to grad school, but I knew that I had to, I guess. I knew it was the next step for me.
So for grad school, what would it look like if it was just research? Like what would the day-to-day be like on that end?
Yeah. So if you're doing research, for your master's or for a PhD. You are answering a question using an experiment that you design in partnership with your advisor, who can have funding for you and maybe doesn't, and you're contributing the answer to that question. Ideally, at the end of your research, your thesis would end up contributing to the scientific community an answer to a question that wasn't answered before. And research is always, I've participated in lots of research studies. I'm so happy and fortunate to say that I was published this year, but that's not, I knew I didn't want my information to stay in the scientific community. I wanted it to be communicated to people who don't know anything about science, who don't even care about science. Those are the people I wanted to talk to about this stuff. And so the school I went to had a choice. You could choose thesis or applied, and I chose applied, which was not research focused.
Mm. So what does non-research focused look like then?
I got to work with the government on some humpback whale stuff. There are humpback whales that come to Hawaii, and they were delisted from endangered to threatened. Unfortunately, in 2016, with the change of administration, that project was not funded fully again. And so I ended up switching over to a different project, which focused on a different organization that looked into reasons why dolphins and whales strand, which is when they come up on the beach because either dead or near death because something is wrong. Yeah. And so investigating what is causing these animals to die. And then in my latter couple months of my graduate program, I completely went full swing on education to students in Hawaii. Okay. And that's what I ended up getting my postgraduate job focusing on.
Super cool. So as far as dealing with the government, how was that? Did you actually have to talk to people from the government, or it was just your administrator said, here's what you got to do?
It was me and another graduate student, and we worked, we had like two supervisors, but we worked like at the facility, at the government facility. There's a lot of military bases in Hawaii, so it was based on a military base. And it was with NOAA. NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It's what thought the dream was at the time. Yeah. And we were just looking up like recent research and consolidating that research to help inform like management of the species. So definitely grad school work, grad student work, but it was still wonderful.
So you were presenting to government officials then, telling them, hey, like this is what's going on and stuff like that?
We were kind of saying like, this is where the understanding is right now with this population. And this is where this is why they were maybe delisted, and this is kind of the information we know about the numbers and what's causing them to die. What do you guys think you should do? Okay,
so you would, and were they usually positive towards your suggestions or info, or what was kind of their demeanor around those conversations?
I guess as graduate students, we weren't giving suggestions. Okay. We were just consolidating the information so that they could have like the larger discussions. But what I learned in this position is that I can't work for the government because they are very slow moving, and the scale and the pace and what we need to do in the next 10 years is not conducive with me working in the government, because I can't wait 6 months for us to have a meeting about humpback whales. Like we need to be doing this yesterday, you know? So there's also a lot of red tape that you know, it's a bit slow moving. So
for sure. So next 6 months, you have a magic wand. What are you doing for the whales?
I'm working in a lab at this point.
Or so like what did you want, if you ideally what does that 6 months look like instead of 10 years or whatever?
I mean, ideally we would use a bunch of tools at our disposal, which I would say in 2020 is a lot of social media, a lot of videos, a lot of TV, to raise people's awareness, to help inspire stewardship and responsible behaviors around these animals, and let everybody know, hey, these are the reasons why these animals are dying. What can we do to help build a sustainable system on an individual level, a local level, state, federal, all these things.
So is it because people are running into them with their boats, their fishing nets, or it's just a bunch of stuff that people could be taking care of?
It's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
It is a bunch of stuff. It's fishing gear being left behind, entangling whales. It's noise pollution from underwater explosions, from oil exploration, or even the military that's deafening them when they're so sensitive to sound. It's the lack of food because of a changing ocean temperatures and changing natural assemblages in the ocean that now change where prey is, and you have to migrate further. It's boat strikes, like you mentioned. It's plastic pollution. It's a lot of things.
As far as that noise goes, I don't think many people really understand what's the range on some of those whales. It's got to be absurd.
Yeah, I love noise pollution. I love teaching people about noise pollution. Because water is denser than air, sound travels much further. I think like 4 to 5 times further and louder. And so if whales are sensitive to echolocations. Some dolphins participate in echolocation, but humpback whales sing, actually. They sing to actually, there's some questions about why they sing, but it's thought that it's for mating.
Yeah.
And so that song can travel quite far. So if you have a very large ship engine in the area, it can be deafening. Or if you have orcas, like in the North Pacific, and you have heavy boat traffic, maybe from whale watching, maybe from fishing vessels, these individual animals are trying to communicate with one another in their pod, and they can't hear over it. And so at a small scale, you can't hear, but at a large scale, it can be so loud, especially with underwater explosions, that it can cause internal damage and even sometimes death.
Not ideal.
Not ideal. Something you just never thought about, underwater sound. But, there are actually a lot of amazing strides being taken, more efficient engines, lower boat speeds. There's a lot of things that people are doing to help combat this issue.
Yeah. So where are we at now as far as not humanitarian stuff or conservation stuff? Like, what else are you doing other than working?
Other than working, God, I do so much. I worked for a nonprofit for many years outside of graduate school. We did education and outreach locally in Hawaii. And then once COVID-19 got us all at home, we started focusing on virtual education. I use virtual education tools to help teach people about the ocean, whether it's through like blogs, social media accounts. But I really think that my next steps are I create a lot of curriculum, and I want to help make that curriculum widespread in classrooms that help kids feel prepared for what's to come the next couple of 30 years, and how to be leaders as we face those challenges and how to rise up to the occasion to solve some of the issues that we're just now seeing the iceberg tip of,
Yeah, absolutely. So where would, if people are looking for those things, where would they find you as far as social media and that stuff goes?
Yeah, so I have a website called The Conservationist Collective. If you want to be part of our collective, you can learn more about topics there. And then I do share information on my social media platforms, which are all Carissa and Coffee are my usernames on Instagram and TikTok.
Well,
and I think that right now everyone's got so much going on in their lives. It's like, let's just make this information easy, digestible, concise, and let people be better without having to put in so much work.
Yeah. What's been the reception on TikTok and your social medias as far as bringing this information to people?
People are mobilized. Gen Z is inspiring. Everyone wants to radically help the world and help the planet. And to go from someone who was like made fun of for being a vegan when I was 18 to now having like tons of people be like, just tell me how to stop using plastic. Just tell me how to do this. Like, it's more than I could ever have hoped for when I was younger. And so I would say that people are really looking for they want to know how to make the changes, and they don't have the time to do it. And that's the type of space that I'm trying to fit into.
So what do you do on on a daily basis on a small scale, and then also on a large scale to kind of make those changes?
Yeah. I would say that since 2016, I've been drastically reducing my plastic consumption. I'm single-use plastic free, which I recognize not everyone can do. But it's important to at least think about it, you know, like, oh, I guess I could get this thing at the grocery store in glass or in aluminum cans rather than plastic.
Right.
Voting, especially involvement at the local level. I've seen so much change in my community in Hawaii for the better just by participating at a local level.
Yeah.
Your diet choices, if you feel educated or feel inclined to make those types of choices, are great. And then my favorite one, which is holding companies and corporations accountable, because the way that we live in the United States, they have a lot of power and we have a lot of power as a consumer. And so I just divested from Chase Bank. I'm in the process right now of actually trying to stop using Amazon, which is so challenging for me. And
I was
just
about
kind
to
of
say, in Hawaii, that's got to be hard to do.
it's so hard to do.
Yeah.
But I'm getting there. But there's a lot of people, if you just want to try, you're already doing so much. And I don't want people to feel like they have to be perfect, because every single thing is helping.
So as far as the Amazon goes, that's just because of their overuse of materials or their carbon footprint. What is the main draw on that?
I think that the main thing for Amazon, it wasn't the fact that they are making so much money and have made so much money during this pandemic. It was really more like the human rights violations that I felt like are being done in developing nations that that was kind of my biggest thing for Amazon. Was I was like, you know what? And then seeing all these small local businesses in my community struggle, I was like, why can't I just put my money there? And so now I'm trying to do that.
I feel like Amazon has a place as far as they can do a lot more as far as technology wise goes. But I think it is tough when your family and friends can't keep their shop open because this big, large company is now taken over. So it's definitely tough because the technology is not there on one hand, but then it's the brick and mortar right next to you. So it's hard to choose. Convenience obviously is very, very nice as well.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that brick and mortar is like that era is ending? Do you think that?
So I have lots of opinions. So as far as groceries go, it'll be interesting because I think a lot more people are picking it up, and I thought that was going to be one thing that was going to be very hard to kind of get rid of. People, I think, just really enjoy shopping, so it's going to be hard to not have people go there. But I think brick and mortar shops definitely are going to go very far. It's going to keep going away. Amazon is just buying up the businesses now just for shipping, just so they have warehouses. But I'm trying to imagine in a place in where people would want to go an extra 30, 40, take an hour or two to run errands when they could take 5 or 10. So I think Marshalls will probably, I don't know why Marshalls or those places aren't online, but I think those places will still be around for a while. But yeah, as far as brick and mortar goes, things are changing. It'll be interesting to see where they go for sure.
E-commerce is skyrocketing, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think
we'll see what that looks like in a couple of years.
Yeah, I think at some point someone's going to come up with something where people like to see each other again. So that will bring people, that will take people outside. Maybe it's going to the ocean or whatever it is. But yeah, something like that hopefully is coming. Maybe it's already here. We just haven't found it yet. But yeah, as far as other than work and stuff like that, what have you been up to in the day-to-day life as far as that goes?
I think that, and I discovered that always known this about myself, but it took me a little bit during 2020 to really start prioritizing it. I really need to spend like a significant portion of my day outside in order to be my most productive self. So like I'll time block work. I feel like I work a lot, but I will time block it so that I always have breaks to spend time outside. So I will I feel like I spend most of my free time. I like running as my form of exercise and yoga, but I also spend a lot of my time surfing and diving. Those are like my two favorite things to do.
That's awesome. So as what's the diving scene like out there? Is there plenty of, I bet you probably know all the spots. So
there's beautiful diving in Hawaii. I want to get better. You mentioned breath holds earlier. I want to get better at free diving, but you got to have a lot of cardio to do that. So I like to snorkel and free dive. I don't scuba dive that much, but there's different places, and I have my favorite spots on the island. But I hope that one day I'm fortunate enough to go to some more untouched areas of the world to see diving, diving where there wasn't that much of an impact so far.
Okay. Yeah. My wife and I, we were in Bali for our honeymoon, and we got to go to, I'm not going to remember the island now, but there was turtles. And it was very hard to get out to them. But once we saw and we went look around at turtles, but I think that was the first time I've seen them not in an aquarium. So it was very cool. Yeah, it was very exciting, but we definitely, our snorkels and all that stuff was not very high end. So we got a lot of salt water in there for sure.
But I bet that was a experience you definitely remember.
Oh yeah. Yeah. At one point I felt like Finding Nemo, because we were on like the safe part. There was maybe like 10 or 15 feet of till the sand, and then it started getting darker. I'm like, I'm not going out there. I've seen the movies. We're not going out there.
We are not going off that. No, yeah. I totally get that. Yeah, we have green sea turtles everywhere here. A lot of people who visit are fortunate enough to see them, and they're the best.
That's super cool. As far as when you're diving and stuff like that, how deep do you go? What do you have going on there?
I wish I could say my deepest I've been is 45 feet. But wow. I know that people are like incredible here. People are like having static breath holds of like 3 minutes and 50 seconds diving to a 96-foot shipwreck without weights. People are really pushing the boundaries here in Hawaii when it comes to free diving. And I just want to be someone, it's kind of like meditation too. Like you really need to be, you have to have a lot of control over your mind to free dive. And that's kind of one of my favorite parts of it. It's because it's challenging mentally, physically, yes, but mostly mentally, because your breath hold is mostly mental.
Yeah. Well, because also you have to, how do you regulate? Because I go down to the bottom of a deep pool and my ears hurt. How do you get past that part? Like the 12-foot mark.
Yeah. So the water's heavy. You need to equalize your ears. So you go like this, and for those who go like this, you plug your nose and then you press out, and then it equalizes your ears. So you want to do that every 10 feet.
So as you're diving down, you're doing that.
Yeah, you're doing that. So you get to the bottom.
Wow. And they can still make it down 90 feet while doing that's.
Oh, you guys got to follow some Hawaii freedivers. They're blowing my mind.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
As I think a lot of people, it's not the lack of oxygen, it's the amount of carbon dioxide, right? That your body's not used to. So what's your training like to kind of improve that?
So I haven't been able to take a professional freediving course yet. It's on my list of things to do, but my understanding is exactly what you just said. So you get a signal in your body and your brain, like you need to breathe, but really that's because of an accumulation of carbon dioxide, and you actually have enough oxygen to last much, much longer. And so it's about training your body and your mind to breathe through those. Sometimes you'll get contractions and you want to breathe through them, and it takes practice, but if you can breathe through it, you can stay down for much longer than you think.
How do you breathe through it if you're underwater?
Oh, sorry, not breathe through it. Like you, I guess, think through it, but like you have to learn how to sit with it and sit with the contractions, sit with the pressure, sit with the signal in your brain and say, no, I'm actually okay. Actually, I'm okay on my breath. And my one breath I have is enough. And you make sure you keep your mouth closed. You don't leave your snorkel in your mouth. You make sure that you're moving in a streamlined way. You want to move slowly. There's lots of tricks.
So next time we do this podcast, you'll be an experienced freediver. We got plenty of time in 2020. So as far as if anybody at this point wants to do something because they are inspired or motivated, whatever it is from the podcast, they would go to your websites, and what's something else that they could do to kind of get started?
To get started, I would say that maybe if you're new to this information, it might seem overwhelming, but just know that in 2020, there's literally never been more resources, and there has never been more tools to get you started on your journey towards conservation, towards sustainability. And so the things that I mentioned earlier, just picking one of them or maybe picking all of them, you can learn tools on my website and on my social channels, but there's also so many other proponents of how to be climate leaders and things you can take in your daily life. And you can just pick what fits best suited for you. Like everyone, I get a lot of like, well, hey, I love art. I don't want to give up plastic. And it's like, don't. You love that. It brings you joy. Do something that doesn't seem like a lot of work. And for me, that seemed like, oh, I already wasn't eating that much red meat in the first place, so I might as well just start there. And it can be different for everyone. So I like to use my example of traveling. So traveling is really, really important to me, but I know that it has a large impact on emissions, traveling on planes. But because of where my values are of wanting to see places before they're gone, I recognize that what I do in other parts of my life will hopefully outweigh that, because we don't have to carry we don't have to carry all the burdens on our shoulders.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. So the last two questions that everybody gets, what is your definition of health? Not the dictionary definition, but what do you kind of live by?
I would say that my definition of health really starts with like a healthy mind. You want to like where you live, and you live in your body, and you want to take care of your two homes. You have your body and your mind, and you have the environment. So I think that I feel healthiest when I'm treating my body with nutrient foods, when I'm rewarding my body with physical activity, and when I'm living my values. And if one of those things are out of balance, I don't feel like I'm in my healthiest state. So I get a lot of reward in my life by living intentionally, and that's can be in a bunch of different ways. So I would say, that's what health is to me.
Love it. And then the last one, what is something from this podcast that they can take from their life and use as a positive?
I would say that all of this is really exciting and positive. All the changes we're seeing, it's for a really large issue and a big challenge, but it's all so positive and so fun and so exciting. And so if you are someone who's like, I want to be someone who spends more time outside, or I want to be someone who learns how to be comfortable in the ocean, it's all going to come with a little bit of a risk and a little bit of maybe a little fear, but it's so worthwhile to push your boundaries, to follow things that are important to you. So if things seem scary, or, oh, that's too adventurous for me, but I've always wanted to do it, I would say just try it, or that seems too hard to do that for the planet. Just try it, because it's actually a lot more fun than you think.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And absolutely. I hope that we can talk again soon.
For sure. There we go. And I'll pause this one.